critical path. Now this is a term if working on some type of change initiative such as a project or a program, you're going to hear often. So what is a critical path? Understanding and tracking your critical path for your project means you can determine which tasks can affect your project's finish date and whether your project will finish on time. So let's delve into a critical path and understand what makes a critical path and what does not. So these two visuals here, you've got number 1 in red, this is the critical path. Number 2 is not a critical path. And then where you can see number 3, which denotes slack or float, we'll talk about these in more detail. So let's look at number 1 first. So this is the top sequence of tasks and it has no slack or float. Now, slack is the amount of time that a task can slip before it affects another task or the project's finish date. Free slack is how much a task can slip before it delays another task, and total slack is how much a task can slip before it delays the project and therefore drives the finish date of the project. All tasks in this sequence are on the critical path and are called critical tasks. Now, in the detail Gantt view or the tracking Gantt view, critical tasks appear in red. Now, number 2, the lower sequence of tasks does not drive the finish date of the project, and therefore the tasks are not critical. In the detail Gantt view or the tracking Gantt view, non-critical tasks appear in blue. And then finally, number 3, as in this is total slack or float. Now, this is the amount of time this sequence of tasks can slip before it affects the finish date of the project. Now, in the detailed Gantt view, total slack appears as a thin teal line. So, it's important for your project to finish on schedule. This is a rather obvious statement to make. No one starts something aiming to finish it late. So with this in mind, pay close attention to the tasks on your critical path and the resources assigned to them. If a critical task takes longer than you expected it to, or a resource is suddenly unavailable for a critical task, then your project will not be completed by the original finish date. And another important point to make is your critical path is not set in stone. As you go through progressive elaboration on your project, i.e. as your project changes through its life cycle, different tasks may move onto your critical path depending on those changes and that progressive elaboration. So it's important to keep an eye on your critical path. Now, I have my MS Project Training Part 2 project file open here. So let me just make some changes here. So let's look at, first of all, the detailed Gantt view that I first mentioned. So over here on the view drop down, I'm going to, and I can't see detailed Gantt. So whenever you're looking at for any views that are not in here, there are more options. So I'm going to go into more views here. And then from these options, I'm going to search and find detailed Gantt, select that and click apply. I'm then going to make sure we can see the whole of the project. So again, on the view ribbon, I'm going to select entire project and now I can see the view. So within the detailed Gantt view, there's several pieces of information that are quite useful. So number 1, you can see at the end of all the tasks the slack or the float that's available. So we've got 1.5 days on the assemble main unit here, we've got 0.5 days and 1 day. You then can see some red tasks which denote those tasks that are on our critical path, and you can see there is 0 slack on all of these. You can then see on some of these, so if you look on the summary task here, you can see this blue teal line. If we look a bit closer there, and again at the end of this milestone here, which is when the mouse assembly is complete, you can see the blue teal line. It tells us we've got 51.25 days worth of total slack there, and so on. But you can see our critical path here. Now, the default tolerance is 0 slack before something appears on your critical path, but you can change the sensitivity of that tolerance. Now, again, I would look at your organisation's planning standards to see what that tolerance of slack is, but this is how you would change it in MS Project. So, for example, if your tolerance level was 1 day, not 0 days, the way that you would change it in MS Project is File, Options. On the advanced section, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and here you see tasks are critical if slack is less than or equal to. So if I put that up to 1 day and click OK, you can now see that these tasks are now on the critical path because they meet that criteria. So again, I would advise you to refer to your organisation's planning standards or the group PMO and look at their guidance and apply that within your project file. Let me put that back to 0 for the purposes of this exercise. And they are no longer on the critical path. So this is the detailed view. Let's go to the tracking Gantt view, which is more commonly used. So here, tracking Gantt, select that again. On the view tab, I'm just going to make sure we can see the entire project. So you don't quite get as much information here, i.e. the slack, but you can see the critical path here and also the non-critical path items. So this is our critical path here, all the way down to our milestone when computer assembly is complete. But it's easy to see that critical path when you've only got 28 tasks on your project, like what we've got here. However, if you've got 1,000 lines, 10,000 lines within your project, this is not so easy to see in this view. But there is a way to get project to filter that down so you can see the wood for the trees. And this is how you would do it. So if you, again, make sure the view ribbon is selected here. And on the filter options, I'm going to do the drop down and I'm going to select critical. And there you go. It's now filtered it down to only those tasks that are on the critical path. And again, the filter functionality and the group functionality also. So if I take the filter off and do no filter, and then again on the view ribbon, select the group by and select critical. It's now organised the information to be those items that are not critical, so I can shrink that down. And we can look at the items that are now on critical path where it's grouped it, and again I can choose to shrink that down or expand. So let me take that group filter off and set it to no group. So I think the key thing is the filter functionality and the group functionality is extremely powerful functionality within MS Project, and I would encourage you to play around with it and see what you can do with it.